Hi there, Joe Brunsman, and this is a general overview for management of your Hiscox CyberClear policy. All right, now quick legal disclaimer here. This is not going to be a super detailed in the weeds presentation. As much as I really enjoy that type of material, I don't think anybody wants to sit here for 3 hours and listen to me blab on about that stuff. So you'll also notice that I didn't put in specific limits, specific sublimits, any sort of mandatory endorsements in there. I just don't want that type of information being freely available on the internet. I don't think you'd want that information out there anyways. So the purpose of this, as I said before, is just a broad overview of your cyber policy. I'm going to put timestamps, aka section chapters, in the description below so you can go back anytime for quick reference. And you can watch this video anytime at your own leisure. Now, also, and possibly even more importantly, you can send this to other people as you see fit inside of your organization. So for example, let's say you're doing a tabletop exercise, running through various breach scenarios, and you need everybody in the room to quickly understand what is inside of this cyber policy. You can go ahead and use this video for that purpose. Or if you say specifically you want, say, the accounting and finance department to know what's in the cybercrime elements, very useful there. You could just send them the timestamp and they could go directly to that chapter. Obviously, if you ever want to talk about specifics, you can email me or you can give me a call anytime. I prefer a phone call to really help you work through those specific details and be able to answer any questions you have in real time over the phone. And please don't worry if it's a weekend, if it's a holiday, if it's after working hours here on the East Coast. The Navy, thankfully, made sure that I've worked every weekend and time of day and holiday known to man. So don't worry about any of that. I totally understand that. You know, cyber events, you're going from 0 to 100 at the drop of a hat, and I'm here to assist you anytime you need help with that. These are going to be the main topics today, and you're going to see these in the timestamps of the description below. And probably the easiest way to think about that is this is really the following: dealing with data breaches, ransomware events, some type of security failure, an allegation of a security failure, and cybercrime. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about breach costs here. And with these, I've added a little more detail. So obviously you can pause the video at any time, but really help kind of describe what's in these, because we're going to see these elements as well in the cyber extortion, aka ransomware category. All right, first is going to be legal costs, and you can think of the attorney as kind of the central point for everything moving forward. So you're going to have claims counsel if you think an event or an event actually has occurred. And they're going to be assisting, obviously, with drafting those breach notification letters, communications with state and federal offices, communication with law enforcement as necessary, contract considerations, et cetera, et cetera. Next is going to be those computer forensics, and that's really going to help you determine the scope and nature of the breach, give you some type of remediation advice, try and remove that offending piece of malware from your system, or give you an indication on how the bad guy actually got into your system. Next is going to be those notification costs. Generally, that's via breach notification letter. There are alternative notification mechanisms out there, but you'll have to talk to your attorney about that. But that's where that comes from, as well as the call center. So the call center, very important, because you don't want, say, thousands of clients all trying to call you within the space of a couple days of receiving that letter if they have questions moving forward. So it's a call center to really field a lot of those basic fundamental questions so that management just doesn't get overwhelmed trying to deal with that flood of phone calls. Next are those identity protection services. So we can think of that as credit monitoring. Generally, it's 1 year in length for credit monitoring, sometimes more as required. Next, you're going to see crisis management and public relations services. That would help you if your name gets out there in the news somewhere and you need a way to, say, respond to a reporter, or you need management to get some type of training on what to say or what not to say. If you still have clients, if they go through the call center, if that's available, and they just still demand to speak with somebody at the business, they can assist you with that as well. And those data recovery costs, which also go very much hand in hand with the forensics. So that's trying to help you regain access to that data, replace, restore, or repair any infected data, trying to get you back to a level of operation that you were before the event actually occurred. All right, next we're going to talk about cyber extortion. Now, cyber extortion, we're going to need the prior written consent of the insurer. Generally, that's not a problem. And yes, there is a ransomware payment involved. There are some caveats to that dealing with OFAC, but we can talk about those over the phone. And typically that's in some type of cryptocurrency. Also, they could pay, if you look inside of your policy, for goods or services at fair market value. I've never actually seen that, but I guess if there's some circumstance where that would come into play, it's good to know that you could deal with that. And then also within cyber extortion, the policy would respond with the following. And a lot of these you've already seen before. So we've talked about the ransomware payments, attorney, the forensics, data restoration, but also included in that would be business interruption costs. So that's after the waiting period. If your business is unable to generate revenue, you've been down for some time, the policy could help you respond and try and make you whole again there, as well as a negotiator if you do get into that ransom payment type situation. Now, what actually is an extortion event? It's probably more than you would just think. So we generally just think of a ransomware event as bad guy encrypts files, demands cryptocurrency to give you the key to unlock those files. But there's actually more than that. So if you actually look inside of your policy, it's a third party. So that's bad guy and or an employee acting outside the scope of their duties at your business and without, obviously, authorization of your business. And that has to deal with committing or continuing an intentional attack against your business or publicly disclose confidential information of your business. So that could be you fire, say, the head of IT, and the IT guy goes, hey, well, joke's on you, because if you don't pay me, say, $250,000, there's actually malware in your system, and if I don't log in over, say 5 days, then it's going to automatically trigger and you guys are screwed. That may be an example of a reportable extortion event. So don't think of it as just random bad guy in random bad country. It could hit very much closer to home for you. Okay, next is going to be PCI Fines and Assessments. This is the payment card industry data security standards. And generally this has to do with your merchant services agreement following a data breach or a security failure. And what's actually in that? Contractual fines and penalties, monetary assessments, and fees for a mandatory audit. So in more kind of general terms here, what would happen? Well, if you've ever had your bank call you up and they say, hey, we're shutting down your card, we saw fraudulent charges, we will send out a new card via one-day mail, you'll get it tomorrow, and everything will go about as normal. Well, obviously that money has to come from somewhere. So possibly the payment for fraudulent charges, reissuance of cards, there's fees associated with that, as well as a mandatory audit. So if you fall under PCI DSS and you had some type of event dealing with your payment card system, and now you have to once again prove to PCI DSS that you can take those cards again and start generating revenue from the credit cards, the policy could help you with that as well. Next, we're going to see cybercrime, and there's really 3 key components here. So the first is going to be funds transfer fraud, and that's where someone impersonates you to your financial institution and they trick your financial institution into transferring money. Next, you're going to see social engineering, and that's a third party, and they're impersonating. So third party, we can think of, say, bad guy, right? Impersonates a client, a vendor, an employee, or an executive, and they trick you into transferring money somewhere. Next, we're going to see social engineering. Reverse social engineering. So that's where a bad guy, instead of impersonating a client or a vendor, an employer, or an executive, it's where they're actually impersonating your organization and they're tricking those other entities into transferring money that's meant for you. So that's also known as invoice manipulation. Now we're going to get into the kind of miscellaneous coverages here. And don't discount these. They're actually quite important, but I think a lot of people forget about this. So first is going to be bricking. Well, if you've ever bought a piece of hardware, let's say an old hard drive back when you could get a gigabyte hard drive and that was state of the art, and you plug it into your computer and you don't have quite a gigabyte, it's something slightly less than that. Well, the difference is the firmware, and that's the instructions that tell that piece of hardware how to operate. So if a bad guy goes in and, say, overwrites the instructions to that piece of hardware, it in effect turns it into a brick, hence the term bricking. So that could be the cost to rebuild, replace any of that hardware that's been damaged. Next, you're going to see dependent business interruption, and that would be if a service provider goes down because of, say, ransomware or a data breach type event, and through them going down, you are now unable to make money. The policy may help you recoup that loss. An example of that would be, let's say all of your information is hosted with an MSP somewhere. That MSP goes down, so now you're not able to generate revenue because you just can't do anything on your computer systems. Dependent business interruption could come into play there. Next, we're going to see dependent system failure. So this is because of some sort of unplanned event or some sort of outage where now your business is also unable to generate revenue. So that could be, it's not necessarily a ransomware event or a data breach. If we go back to our previous example at an MSP, it's not like they got hit, but let's say they had a real bad patch and they had to take their whole system down, or they had some sort of outage that just was completely unforeseen and now your business isn't able to generate revenue. Once again, not because of a ransomware or a data breach type event. We can notify the insurer and we can try and recoup those losses for you after the waiting period. Next is reputational harm. So a lot of businesses are very concerned that following a breach, some percentage of their clients are going to leave, and because of that, they're going to see a massive drop in revenue. Well, that's where reputational harm comes into play. So it is for a specific period of time after that waiting period where your business could actually be reimbursed for that revenue loss. Generally, inside the policy, there's going to be a third-party accounting firm, also known as like a forensic accountant, that comes in and helps you evidence that loss to the insurance company. Next, we're going to see system failure, and this should sound familiar. So instead of the dependent system failure, where it's some service provider went down and you can't generate revenue, this is where you guys went down because of some unplanned or partial outage, and now your business is unable to generate revenue. So that would be something internally, much in the same vein as, say, a patch came out, it just didn't mesh well with your system, and because of that, your computer system has to go down and you can't generate revenue. Because of that, the policy could make you whole again. Finally, we're going to see utility fraud. And generally, utility fraud, we're going to see two things here most commonly. It's going to be either cryptojacking or some type of telephone fraud, which could be like voice over IP in some circumstances. Cryptojacking is going to be the most common. The first thing you're going to see there is probably just some astronomical electric bill for your business. And what's happened is the bad guy has actually installed some type of malware on your system where they're not trying to steal anything, any client information or business information. They're just using your computer systems to mine some type of cryptocurrency, hence the very large electricity bill. So that's something where you wouldn't commonly think of that as like a cyber policy type coverage feature, but it is inside of there, so make sure you have that in the back of your mind. All right, next we're going to talk about media liability. Now with this, you'll see there's a lot on here, but I've highlighted kind of the important parts in the gold/yellow letters. So if you're worried about copyright infringement, allegations of invasion of privacy, defamation, libel, slander, unfair trade practices, negligence somehow in connection with your media activities, that's where that type of claim activity would be potentially covered. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about what is a potential claim. So a potential claim means really the following. You can read it on your screen. That's not particularly helpful inside the policy. Probably a better way to think about that is generally anything that could potentially bring rise to a claim or rise to coverage under your cyber policy. That leads to the inevitable follow-on question of, okay, what actually is a claim? And we can see written demand for financial compensation or injunctive relief. So that could be somebody brings a lawsuit against you. Somebody files court papers and they demand some type of injunctive relief from the court system. You have some type of regulatory proceeding following a data breach or ransomware event. Client asserts unintentional breach of contract, contractual indemnity of breach costs, and contractual indemnity to a third party. All of those are considered a claim under your policy. Now, before I talked about a security failure. What is a security failure? So we've kind of talked about things that have, happened to your company. We've talked about, say, someone bringing a claim against your company following an event, say a data breach or a ransomware event. Now let's talk about this security failure. So it means failure by you or any others, blah, 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 on your behalf. So let's say there's some allegation that you transmitted malicious software to some other party. So your computer system, somebody downloaded something and maybe it hit your business or it didn't, but then it got transmitted to somebody else and then their business got hit. That could be covered under security failure. A denial of service attack. So let's say your computer systems are being used to actually perpetrate a distributed denial of service attack against somebody else. Let's see, unauthorized acquisition, access, use, disclosure of PII or confidential corporate information. So you face a claim because of that. Or prevention of unauthorized electronic access to your system. And damage to any third-party digital assets. So once again, if it's transmission of that malicious software or denial of service attack. Your system is being used for that. And because of that, some other third party has alleged a damage to their assets. Because of that, that may be covered under security failure. All right, let's briefly talk about some notable exclusions here in orange. All right, does not cover professional liability or product liability. Doesn't cover employee or employer liability. Doesn't generally cover bodily injury or property damage. And fines, penalties, and any sort of like, say, sanctions, punitive damages, exemplary damages, unless insurable by law. And this is important. I wanted to bring this up because, yes, there is coverage for, say, regulatory fines and penalties under your insurance policy, but it's where insurable by law. And oftentimes, we just don't have any court record yet on if those fines and penalties are insurable by law. So that could be a federal law. That could be, say, a state AG coming after you. So it's important to understand that you also need to do the due diligence on your own side for your business to start looking into any sort of compliance or statutory or regulatory regime you could be falling under that could be particularly mandating specific cybersecurity practices. So that way you're not just completely caught off guard if a regulator, and we're seeing this increasingly, starts asking you questions following some type of event. Other considerations for you: please do not admit liability, make a settlement, or make any voluntary payments without insurer consent. And you can't do any of that without prior written consent from the insurer. What do I really mean by that? It's, you never just want to say there's some event going on and you're like, yeah, I think this is 100% my fault. Don't worry about it. We're going to make you right again. Please don't do that. Please let the process work out as it needs to work out. I understand that, yes, these are people's lives. People will get very emotional, including the businesses involved and all the owners and management there. This is not a fun process to go through if you have some type of cyber event, but nonetheless, we just have to work through the process to make sure that we're checking all the boxes necessary to try and keep you out of trouble. Also, please do not delay. I said this at the beginning, don't delay in reporting any type of reportable event to me. There may be a circumstance where something's going on and you're thinking to yourself, I'm not sure if this is covered or not. Please just give me a call. Or if you catch yourself and you're thinking, hey, maybe we should get forensics in to determine if something's wrong before we end up reporting this to cyber insurer. Right now, you know that forensics could actually be covered under your cyber insurance policy. So maybe that's just a waste of time and money that could really kind of bite you on the back end later on, dealing with specific time frames of things that have to be done, specifically breach notification letters. Okay, moving forward here, application, I'm going to send that out for your next policy period. That's roughly 60 days prior to your next cyber insurance renewal. As I've said many times throughout this presentation, I'm here anytime to assist you. You have any questions or concerns whatsoever, please give me a call. If you need help with cybersecurity proper, not necessarily cyber insurance, cybersecurity, you have questions in that arena, I might just know it off the top of my head, or I may be able to give you referrals to a few companies that actually work specifically in that arena to assist you moving forward. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on the market as we move forward. So yes, cyber insurance policies are changing very rapidly. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on the market and trying to talk to you about what your specific concerns are. Please bring those up to me every year on what your specific concerns are, knowing all the intricacies and working parts of your business. And we'll see how that's actually, say, covered or not covered under your policy. And maybe that could be covered under some type of other policy that's available on the market. And of course, I'm going to be giving frequent updates on my YouTube channel here. So please subscribe. I do a lot of cyber insurance and cyber compliance type videos on here. I try to keep them as brief as possible. All right, with that, hopefully you already have a copy of my book. This is Damage Control, Cyber Insurance Compliance. Of course, you can always download it for free, or you can just shoot me an email and I'll send you a copy there. With that, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Stay safe out there. Once again, call me anytime, comments, questions, concerns.